So when I was in high school, I've actually never shared this story.
And I was so caught off guard because this was a conversation that I hadn't had to have with a white person at this point.
But I'm going to show you the video and see your reaction.
I feel like I'm going to be angry the rest of this video. I never want to feel like I'm anyone's teaching moment or have to be anyone's teaching moment.
Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to another video on this channel. My name is Chase, and in this video I sit down with someone who's very special to me, my sister, and we talk about what it was like for us to grow up black in a predominantly white environment. There were some good aspects to it. There were also some negatives. And so we talk about it all. So you can just listen to this podcast style. You can watch the whole thing. But either way, let's talk about it. Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to another video on this channel. My name's Chase, and in case you didn't know, maybe many of you knew, I grew up in a predominantly white environment. And so I thought I'd make this video about what it was like to grow up in a predominantly white environment as a black person, but I figured I'd do that with my sister, Ariana.
Hello.
So we're just going to have a conversation about what it was like growing up black in a white environment. So before we get started, you've been on this channel before. You actually also have a YouTube channel.
We're not going to talk about that.
We're not going to talk about that one? Okay. All right, I won't even leave a link in the description or anything like that.
I haven't posted on that in like years.
But are you bringing it back?
Probably not.
Okay. Are you going to start a new one, or are you just done with YouTube?
I'm done.
Okay. All right, that's fine. But you've been on this channel before. We've done a couple videos together. We did what was the last one we did?
I mean, I've been in vlogs.
Yeah, well, of course you've been in the vlogs. But we've done like videos with just the two of us.
Have we?
We did the baby food challenge, which kind of was just the two of us because we were the two winners.
I feel like we did one.
Oh, actually, I want to talk about that one. We did the singing one. that one we should just leave to the yeah. Anyway, never mind. Let's move on. So Ariana, why don't you tell the people watching this video about yourself, what you're doing, school, all that stuff.
Yeah, I go to Bethel University in Indiana. I'm going to be a senior this year, studying sign language interpreting with a communication minor, and just really passionate about sharing truth with people and just talking about what's going on in the world. You've
been kind of vocal on your campus about issues that have been going on about race, and you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I go to a predominantly white institution, and it's not a large school at all. It's only a little over 2,500 students, I think. But recently we got rid of our diversity and inclusion program, and a couple of students and I were just kind of in the mindset that this isn't okay, and decided to go to the higher up and talk to whether it's the board of trustees or the president and just be vocal about what's going on and just speaking truth into a bunch of people's lives and also receiving truth as well. So that's been really neat, really exhausting and difficult at points.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really exciting for me to see. I mean, because not only because you're my sister, but like growing up, I feel like all of us kind of, but like you were one of the quietest.
Do you think so?
Well, not when you became like a teenager and stuff, like before,
okay,
when you were really little, like you were just so quiet, like all the home videos and stuff, like you're just kind of walking around, just being quiet. And then now you're being so outspoken about all this stuff. And it's exciting for me to see. And so I just want you to know how proud I am of you for doing all that. But we want to talk in this video primarily about what it was like growing up black in a predominantly white environment. And so I think in a way to kind of make this just not just some, incoherent blabbering, we kind of organize this into four different segments. So we want to start with the good, the bad, the ugly, and then end with, did we figure out what we were going to call it?
The blessing.
The blessing. So the good, the bad, the ugly, and the blessing. Because we don't want to end on a down note.
Right.
So yeah, let's just start with the good. The good parts about growing up black in a white environment. You want to start, or you want me to start?
I can start.
Okay, go for it.
I think for me, it comes in two parts. So the first one would just be our parents really put us in a bunch of extracurricular activities, whether it was track or gymnastics, whatever it was, or even with our youth group, we were heavily involved with that. And it was just really neat to I was thankful to be able to shatter low expectations that people placed on black people.
That's good. Yeah. One thing, so our dad taught us growing up about this, and he didn't coin this phrase, but the bigotry of low expectations, right? He always mentioned that, how a lot of people, just because we're black, even subconsciously, they might assume, set the bar very low for us. And so that's a great point I didn't even think of, just the opportunity to constantly be shattering those low expectations.
Yeah, there's a lot that we could dive into there. And the more I look back on growing up in a predominantly white setting, I just think of how much that prepared me for where I'm at today, because I go to a PWI and I'm constantly surrounded by white people.
PWI, you want to?
Yeah, predominantly white institution.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm constantly surrounded by my white peers, constantly the only black person in the classroom, surrounded by white professors, whatever it is. And I feel like I've been almost trained to navigate that white space easier because of how I was raised in a white setting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, I kind of want to mention that more towards the blessing portion, towards the end. Don't worry, I'm not going to sing the blessing.
Yeah, we're not going to do that.
No one wants to hear that from me. But you know, the being able to navigate both worlds is huge, and I want to save that towards the end. But I want to hit on something you said, you know, white space. For some people who might not even be familiar with that term, there's places that are usually thought of to be white space, right? And then there's other places that are typically thought of as being black space, you know, the inner city and what's interesting is most people who are white can avoid going into black space unless they want to go there for something, you know, whereas people who are black, especially black growing up in predominantly white areas, we're constantly going in and out of white and black space. And so that's kind of a whole different sociological aspect to this.
Yeah, that's real.
But yeah, that's a real good point that you made. I'd say for me, and you kind of mentioned it too at the beginning, just so many of the extracurriculars, you know, I got to be part of many extracurriculars that are typically thought of as being white sports. You know, like I played hockey growing up. I was part of the swim team. Did you even know I played hockey?
I didn't know. No.
Yeah. I played hockey growing up, and I was I was not good, but I never really mastered like the hockey stop, you know. But anyway, but I got to do that. I was part of the swim team. You know, the school I went to had lacrosse. I mean, there were sports that are stereotypically thought to be white sports that I got to take part in, and so for me, that was a good part.
It's fun.
So, all right, let's move into the little heavier stuff. So the bad. So not the ugly. So we'll save like the terrible stuff, but the bad. The bad. I'll let you go first this time.
I think one of the bad parts about it was, other than certain family members, I feel like I didn't have. I sometimes felt like I didn't have an ally with me. Yeah. Usually, like in different Bible studies I was in, or different sports, whatever it was, I was typically always the only black person there. So I just felt like there was no one really to relate to me. Even like I was still coming to know who I was, not only as a black person, but just like as a person like in Christ. But I felt like there was no one on my side in my circles that understood my perspective of things. Right.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think people are kind of naturally drawn to people who are like them, and there's no problem with that, but especially because people who are like you are able to go through or are able to understand the difficulties that you're going through. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so it was really hard growing up to be able to relate with people 100% because there was a noticeable difference, no matter how much people want to try and ignore that difference. So yeah, no, that was definitely difficult. And I mean, I could share all kinds of examples, and mine's actually kind of similar. For the bad is just always constantly being aware of the fact that you're the only black person, right? I was actually, so yesterday, in case you didn't know, if you're new to this channel, I'm a pastor. And so yesterday I was preaching, and a guy came up to me after, and we were talking a little bit about race, and he said, how did he say it? He said, I've been in a few instances where I was the only white person in the room, and I noticed it, right, is what he said. And I was like, yeah, that's so true. And that's kind of how I feel 100% of the time. And it's not a bad thing. I guess this isn't the bad part.
Right.
This is under the heading the bad. But I mean, it's not a bad thing, but it's just always constantly being aware of your race.
Yeah. Right? And it was and still is at points really difficult to navigate those conversations when it comes to that, because there are numerous people that would come to me and talk about like, you're my only black friend, but I don't see color. Right. And that was like the biggest thing I got, like, oh, like we're all the same, like I was like, oh, but I want you to see me, right? You know? Exactly. And that was really difficult as well. People were trying so hard to make you feel comfortable that, you know, they're saying things like that they're colorblind, which is actually making you more uncomfortable. Yeah, right? Exactly. You mentioned how people were telling you that you're their only black friend. That actually might be something that I would actually put in the good, is that
and maybe this is towards the blessing at the end, but having the chance to be a voice into issues that the people might not have any other any way to, they might not have any other person they can talk to about these things. And so it's difficult to always be someone's kind of Black experience.
Yeah.
But we'll come back to that because I actually want to put that in sort of the blessing experience of mine. But so the ugly, let's get down into the frustrating things, like the things that we really don't like. You want to go first, or you want me to go first? You want me to start? Okay. I'd say, I mean, for me, definitely the biggest thing is people saying unintentionally offensive things. Now, this is difficult because we don't want people tiptoeing around, but people do say some real hurtful things.
Yeah.
I mean, I can share one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll share one. This is probably the worst, not the worst racial thing that's happened to me, but the worst thing that's happened to me, I guess I can say, because I grew up in a predominantly white area. So for me, so when I was in high school, I've actually never shared this story. And so I don't know. People are going to know exactly who I'm talking about, probably.
All right, I'm interested.
Have you ever heard the name Dan? Not like as a person, but like as a derogatory.
I haven't.
Okay.
Should I say I have?
No.
Okay.
No. Well, I'd never heard it either. I mean, I had never heard of it. But I found out in high school that a lot of people were calling me Dan, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And they were calling a couple other people Dan, and then I realized that all the people they were calling Dan were Black. And I was like, okay, this is kind of weird. So what does this stand for? So I went online, I looked up Dan, and it stands for, how can I say this censored on a family friendly channel? Basically dumb.
Okay. Yeah, I know the last two.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Donkey.
Yeah.
Negro.
Yeah.
Dumb donkey Negro is basically what
the censored version.
Yeah, except actually that would have been a lot nicer.
Yeah.
So that was frustrating. And the weird thing though, I think I kind of suppressed that memory. But and that's actually not a good example of unintentionally offensive things, because I mean that's pretty intentional.
Yeah.
But it was a large group of people that were doing that in high school, and that was frustrating. But there'd be other people that would say things. I got to be careful of the examples I give, because a lot of these people are still good friends, and I don't want to kind of shame them for what they did. But I'll give one example. Someone might see this and know who they're talking about. But I was with a friend of mine growing up, and their parents were like, hey, we saw this guy that looks just like you. And you remember this? When this happened?
I remember this.
Yeah. And so they took me into, I think it was like a Walgreens. Like they took me into the Walgreens to go meet this other Black guy.
Wait,
yeah, they took me into the store.
Oh no.
To go meet the other guy. And I remember I'm probably, 12.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, this guy looks just like you. I'm like, he's Black. Like, other than that, he doesn't look like me.
Yeah.
But things like that happened a lot.
Yeah.
And it was frustrating.
Yeah. I don't think it's only like ignorance that people have, but sometimes people are like intentionally not wanting to learn or see the other person's perspective. And then it turns out to just be a really hurtful experience. And I have two examples as well. So the first one was when I was probably 14 or something. Both of these happened on mission trips, actually. The first one was a local mission trip, but we would have these things called encourograms that we would send to each other.
Like encouragement?
Yeah,
things?
it was like encouragement cards that we would send to each other. And you could put it in like a random envelope and just encourage whoever was around you. And I remember I had an afro at the time. My afro was like pretty short still. And this one guy put on an encouragram, put to me, he said like, shave your head, Afro kid. And like the rest of the week, a lot of people were calling me like Afro kid. And it was just like, I was so young and I was like, I don't know how to respond to this. Like, I don't find this funny at all. Like, it's really hurtful. Also, I was still super insecure about my hair, because I feel like as a Black woman, we have to go through this whole hair journey that just is such a struggle at points and like brings out a lot of insecurity. So everyone was pointing out my afro, but like in a negative, like there's a negative connotation to that. And I just remember like being so hurt by that and like people laughing at me. Like it wasn't like with me. And I told people like, oh, like I'm uncomfortable. This isn't funny to me. But I remember like people would still like call me Afro kid throughout the week. Yeah. And that's definitely a memory that I suppressed till like just recently. You know, I'm like, oh man, like that actually like hurt. And sometimes like a coping mechanism, I think, for anyone when they're hurt is just to like laugh it off or just be like, oh, I'm not actually hurt. But I remember telling people like, this isn't funny to me, right. And like them still doing that.
Yeah. And that's interesting. I mean, you mentioned, and I want to hear the other one, so I'm not cutting you off, but you mentioned the coping mechanism is people like to laugh it off. And I almost wonder if sometimes, maybe this is part of that laughing it off, but like we don't even realize how offensive that was until later, you know?
Yeah.
Like there were so many times that I can think of when people said things that were really offensive. And in the moment I laughed, but it was almost just like because I have no idea what else to do in the moment, you know?
Yeah, I was talking to Mom, like, I don't know, a couple weeks ago when a lot of these racial issues were kind of coming to a head in America. And I was just saying, like, I just feel like all of this is getting closer, or I'm becoming more aware of these things now. Because as a kid, you notice things like that are going on. Like, I'm not blind to the fact that I was the only Black person in so many areas, but your eyes are just way more open. And like, as you begin to learn and educate yourself and just realize the like severity of everything going on.
Yeah. I mean, people are like, man, all these racial things are coming to like in the news now, like all these racial things are happening. And it's like, you know, it's not that they weren't happening before. It's that now people are just noticing, and there's many things that even, you know, we haven't noticed until recent in life.
I remember too, like just recently someone reached out to me and they were like, how is your younger brother doing about all the police brutality? And they were like, he's only 11, right? Like, is he asking all these questions? And I was like, you have to understand, this is a conversation my parents have had with us since day one.
Right,
you know?
Exactly.
Like how to interact with the police, or how to interact when you're the only Black person in the room.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we did growing up every single day, or not every single day, we didn't watch this every single day, but every single month, let me try this again. Every single Black History Month, we would watch Roots. And so if you haven't seen Roots, it's a show that kind of goes through from when a man was brought over from Africa all the way up until pretty much modern day, his lineage, and it's based on a true story. But so we were watching all this stuff, and so all these people are having these conversations and seeing things for the first time. And it's like, no, this has been going on since the conception of this country, pretty much, you know. Yeah. But to go back to what you were saying, and then I'll let you get to your second point of the ugly. Did you see the video with Louis Giglio and Lecrae? Did you see that recently? I don't know if you saw that.
I don't think so.
So he's Louis Giglio is a large pastor in Atlanta, and so there's a video with him. I think it was the Chick-fil-A CEO was there, and Lecrae. Okay. And so they're having this conversation about race. And Louis Giglio said something that sounded really offensive. He cleared it up a little bit, and I think I do understand what he was trying to say, but that's not the point of this video. But it came off, basically he used the phrase, we need to talk about the blessing of slavery. And again, terrible choice of words. Right, you can't get much worse than that. Even though I do think I see where he was going with that. But as he says that, Lecrae's just sitting there and he goes, he's just nodding his head. And he might even say, yeah. And a lot of people kind of rip Lecrae apart for saying for doing that. And I was like, I've been in that situation so many times. Yes. Like when people say things that are just so offensive, and I'm just trying to figure out how I can correct what they said and call them out on that without coming across as like angry Black person. Right. And all I can really do is like, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a whole nother conversation too. Like almost having to mask a little bit of who you are to like cater to like a white person sometimes. Because you don't want to come off as the stereotypical Black person, angry Black person. Yeah. And it's difficult to navigate those conversations, but also approach it with a sense of grace, because there are people who just are very uneducated on this topic. Exactly. And don't know. Exactly. Yeah.
So let's come back to that at the end, because that actually is a little bit in the blessing part for me. Yeah. So before we come back to that, what's your other? The
other ugly? Yeah. This also happened on a mission trip. My sophomore year of high school, and there was a white friend who pulled me aside, but we were in the same room with other white people, and I was the only Black person on this mission trip. And she asked me, Ariana, can I ask you a question? And I was like, okay, sure. And she was like, how do you feel when white people say the N-word? And I was so caught off guard, because this was a conversation that I hadn't had to have with a white person at this point.
Because how old were you?
I was 14, okay. But this wasn't a conversation that had come up yet in my life. Yeah. So I was remarkably uncomfortable. And I told her, like, my response was, oh, I don't think I really care as long as you don't say it around me. And I said that, and then other like white people heard it, and then they started using that word on this mission trip. And I was so uncomfortable, but I was also in a stage where I didn't want anyone else to be uncomfortable. So I was just quieting how I really felt. Yeah. And then literally a year later, I talked with her and I was like, hey, it was a year since we've been on this trip and I've actually been wanting to talk to you about this. And I just told her, like, this isn't a word you need to be using or should be using at all. This is how I really felt when you asked me this question. And we got the chance to have an honest conversation about it. It was really redeeming at the end. But it was such an ugly moment in my life because I was so hurt by what was going on. And the fact that they then started using that term around me on this mission trip, I was just like, there's something disconnected here. Yeah,
well, that's so glad. That's so good that she responded positively. There was a girl in high school, I remember, that I'm about to make myself sound old. I hate this. Back in the MySpace days.
Oh no, I've never used MySpace.
I knew. But like, so people, she would always be using the N-word on her post there, and so I sent her a message and said, hey, when you use that word, it makes me uncomfortable. But she just never answered, and I don't remember if she kept using it or not. But we never. Yeah.
So. It's hard too because as a kid, you're exposed to these things so early. Even when I was running track as a younger girl, I remember feeling this sense of like uncomfortability when people would use different terms around me or just treat me differently because I was Black. Yeah. And like you're exposed to these things so young, and then you don't know how to navigate these conversations when you're a kid because you're like your parents can teach, like our parents taught us so much of how to navigate different conversations, but still when you're in that situation yourself, it's a lot more difficult to figure out what to say in those moments. So then like the older I got, when these conversations would come up about the N-word or about police brutality or about whatever it was definitely not easy. It's never easy to navigate these conversations, but it was definitely like I had vocab for what I was trying to say and how I felt once I got older. Yeah, I mean that was definitely one of the biggest struggles about not really being able to articulate what we were feeling, but more importantly, not wanting to make other people uncomfortable, so we didn't say anything. You know. All right, I want to show you a video. Okay. And I want to see your reaction to it. I didn't even think about doing this until right now. Okay. But okay, I'm not even going to preface the video. I'm just going to show it. It's going to make you upset, and so I'm going to have to edit it heavily to be on this video, but I'm going to throw it up on the screen for you guys as well, but I'm going to show you the video and see your reaction. I feel like I'm going to be angry the rest of this video.
I think that you are. And
which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Right. Okay, ready?
Okay.
So imagine being the only Black person in the room during this. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all you can say. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
just seeing him like in the corner on his phone, that I've been in, not that situation like specifically, but being so uncomfortable, just like trying to not react and just like be on your phone acting like nothing's really going. No. Yeah,
and probably to some degree hoping that people realize that you're uncomfortable without having to blow up and be the angry. Yeah.
And even the caption, like no hard R's. I've heard that argument so many times. Like it's fine, there wasn't a hard R.
Right. Yeah. So are you angry now?
Yeah.
I know. I was mad for like 2 days when I saw that video.
I'm just envisioning like what that looked like after the video ended. What those people, like if he had a conversation with them, if they realized like, oh man, we shouldn't have done that. Oh man, I
mean, they were looking pretty happy.
That's frustrating.
Yeah. And so, and being in that situation and I mean, while I've been in situations where people who are white are using that word freely, and it's so frustrating. And now that I'm older, like now I speak up.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
That hasn't happened in a long time. Yeah. But specifically before college. And I know people say kids will be kids. Well, kids are going to be how they're taught by their parents.
Exactly.
And so realizing that kids were saying that made me realize that parents were either saying that or okay with that being said in their houses. But that's a whole other issue. But even things that are considered less racism, you know, I've heard these things a lot. And I don't know if you saw the chart with I keep showing you things. Okay. I don't know if you saw the chart with like different things that this one is actually aimed primarily towards Black women, but things that Black women have been told by other women or maybe other men in predominantly white areas. So here's a few of them.
Yeah, I've seen that.
You've seen this? Can you say that you've been called every single one on these?
Let's look.
So you act white.
I've been called that.
Check. Me as well.
Check.
But you're not really black.
Check.
Yep. You don't really count.
Not those exact words, but yeah.
So I actually had a guy who might see this, but I'm not even upset if he sees this because this was messed up.
Oh, I see what that you don't really count means. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a guy. I was having a conversation with a guy about 3 weeks ago about race, and he literally said, "I thought you were one of the good ones."
Wow.
And I see, like there, I just laughed, but that's not funny at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was frustrating.
Yeah.
You're not the same. You wear nice clothes and have nice things.
Check.
Similar. You're an Oreo.
Check.
An Oreo. Yeah, that was a big one. And I actually put this in another video in the past. That one messed me up for a long time when people would say you're not really black. Because I would know by looking at a mirror that I'm not white. And if I'm being told that I'm not really black, then it's like, well, what am I? So
I remember having that conversation with you like years ago.
Yeah.
And that gave me voice to how I've been feeling about friends saying that. Yeah, I've been called that a lot.
I wish I was tan like you.
Yes.
Yep. Well, of course you're fast.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm not that fast. So I haven't been called that one. Or I haven't asked that one, but we used to play, when I played football in college, and we would play basketball a lot. And I was one of the only linemen that could. I couldn't technically dunk, but I could dunk like a smaller ball. I could never palm the basketball, but I could dunk like a tennis ball. I could get up higher than most of the other linemen. And people would say, "Well, of course you can jump high because you're black."
No, the fast one happened to me because I ran track when I was younger, but that happened at a youth retreat because we would play this like Steal the Bacon. We played that, and a lot of the youth leaders were like, "Oh, like of course you're like one of the fastest ones here."
Yeah. Two more. Before I met you, I didn't know black people could be pretty.
Yeah, definitely that, or like you're pretty for a black girl, or yeah.
You talk like a white girl. I've never been told I talk like a white girl, so I can say that one.
No, I've been. Yes, you talk white. You talk like a white girl. Yeah.
And what's even more frustrating, and this is probably like this would lead to a completely different video, is the fact that even several of those phrases have come from people who are black.
Yeah, that's so real. I hear that a lot when I first went to college because a lot of my black friends at school have come from predominantly black settings. So when I hear like, oh, you talk white or you act white or you dress white, a lot of that has come from my black friends at school.
Exactly. And so one of the difficulties of growing up black in a predominantly white space is feeling like we don't fully fit into the white community, obviously, because, but then also to some degree feeling like we don't fit in with, in the black community that's only grown up in the black community.
Right. Yeah. That's very difficult.
Yeah.
That one sometimes hurts even more.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One more part before we head on to the blessing. We're talking about some of this heavy stuff, the Nword and these horrible offensive things that people are saying.
Yeah.
What's difficult sometimes is also when things have subtle racial undertones to them, navigating those in white space. And so, for example, where did you guys just stop for lunch?
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A. All right, there's this big ongoing saga about what's better, Chick-fil-A, Popeyes, right?
Oh, yeah.
And while that's not strictly a racial thing, I mean, there's white people who like Popeyes better. There's black people who like Chick-fil-A better, right? I mean, it's not specifically a racial thing, but there's racial tones to that argument, right? And so being in situations when you're the only black person, when there's conversations that have racial undertones, even if they're not directly racial conversations, if that makes sense, it can be difficult.
That's so true. And I honestly was thinking about that the other day because when I first went off to college, I was so heavily convincing everyone around me that like I'd never listened to country music. I didn't like country music. I don't like it, but it's such like a stereotypical white thing that I tried to like make up for that almost. So like anytime a country song came on, I was like, oh, you have to turn this off. And like my white friends would laugh. They were like, oh, like country's not that bad. But I was like, no, like black people don't like country music, and like, I get that for sure.
And that kind of leads back to what you're saying about laughing. Like we kind of deflect that by making a joke. And actually, I'm going to be shooting a video with a good friend of mine about black jokes, specifically how many of us who are black in white spaces kind of use those to deflect. So kind of what we've been mentioning, but we'll have a whole nother video coming out about that. But
that's going to be so good.
Anyway, let's try and move into the more redeeming qualities.
Yeah,
into the,
this is heavy.
I know, this is heavy. But what about, so yeah, let's just move into the blessings. What do you think are some of the blessings of growing up in a predominantly white area as a Black person? Want me to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
I'd say, and again, if you're new to this channel, this is a Christian channel. I'm a pastor. Ariana's a strong Christian as well. And I think God has put both of us in a unique position to be able to have kind of a foot in both worlds, you know? And so, our parents did a great job of making sure that we did grow up around people who were Black, that we were put in, organizations that were all Black. And we did a lot of things in kind of the all Black setting, but then we also lived the majority of our life in white space. Yeah. And so, I feel like we're uniquely equipped to kind of have a voice on both sides because people who grew up in only seeing Black people and only in Black space don't really understand people who are white, you know, and there's a lot of people who are Black that think that all white people are filled with hatred and animosity, when in reality, after spending time in a white space, we know that it's more just the people over here have a lack of understanding because they don't know anyone over here, you know, which goes back to what you were talking about being people's Black experience. Like, it's tiring, but it's almost a blessing to be able to communicate cross-culturally.
Yeah, I agree. I never want to feel like I'm anyone's teaching moment or have to be anyone's teaching moment, especially in recent times when I've had a lot of my white friends reach out like, how do I educate me on this? Educate me on racism. And that's been frustrating because I'm like, I'm not your teacher. But at the same time, I am in certain cases the only Black person that some people know. Exactly. And so it has been a blessing being able to speak truth into their lives and being able to give them a different experience when people say like, oh, well, like all Black people think every single cop is bad, or all Black people are lazy, or all Black people this, like all these stereotypes that we're able to break because like it's just not the case for like it's just a generalization. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that does. And I think it's a unique position to be in. It's a tiring position. And like you said, I don't want to, I get tired of being people's Black experience sometimes, but it's a position that I know God has put me in and that I've just grown to accept.
Yeah. And it's been nice too, because like, I can't speak for every Black person. I've had certain professors, friends, whoever it is say, hey, Ariana, what do Black people think about this? And I'm like,
yeah, I had that in high school too. We were learning about slavery, probably, 10th or 11th grade. And the teacher said, Chase, what's the Black opinion on this? I'm like, I don't represent the Black delegation here. Like, I'm the representative for the Black race about to speak. Like,
right. And that's so much pressure too. I can't do that.
Yeah. And actually, as a side note, we're not even speaking for everyone who's Black that grew up in a white environment. So if you're watching and still listening, I'd love it if you left a comment letting us know what your experience was like. Like, have you experienced this stuff, or was your experience completely different? Let us know. But anyway.
Yeah. So while that is super frustrating because I can only speak for my experience truly. Like, as many Black people there are in the world, that's as many Black experiences there are in the world. That's a good point. But at the same time, along with that, it has been nice being able to give people my perspective on what's going on, whether it's times of like racial injustice, which is happening all the time, but whether it's like peaks like that are happening right now, or even on my campus where there's not many Black people on the campus, and I can say like, hey, this is how I feel as a Black woman on campus, and like I don't have the same experiences as my roommates or my white friends or whatever it is, so that has been nice, being able to help other people become aware of what's going on.
Yeah, the fact that the way they view life is not necessarily the way everyone views life. Yeah. But yeah, that's a good point, not speaking on behalf of the whole race. Yeah. I don't know why I just got this picture of like every time you're asked a question or I'm asked a question, like we're about to speak and this dramatic music plays. Yes. We're speaking on behalf of the whole race.
Yes. Because then there's like that thought too of like, oh, there's going to be another Black person that hears this that is not going to agree with me.
Exactly.
So I can't speak on it. I can only talk about myself.
Yeah. And this is leading into completely different territory, but one of the most frustrating things about that is when people who hold the opinion that goes against what the majority of Black people are believing, and they find the one Black person who agrees with them and starts waving them around as like, hey, this person's Black and they're saying this thing that I believe. And so then they start saying, this is what you need to believe. Yeah. And yeah, that gets so frustrating.
Yeah. That's We could see.
And I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to name names, but there's many people, as you know, who are kind of becoming more and more celebrity status. That I've been getting so many people sending me videos and articles linking to this person saying, "Look, this is what this black person says."
Yep, I know.
So
I know.
I'm going to leave it there because I'm this close to calling a couple people out, so I'm not going to do that. But yeah. So where were we going?
We were trying to end on the blessing.
Yeah. See, we were trying to end on the blessing, and then I got frustrated again. I think I got more frustrated there than you got when I showed that video.
I was about to say it's that video now.
Right. So anyway, I don't want to keep this video going for too much longer, but the thing that stuck out to me the most about everything you said is, for as many black people as there are, that's how many black experiences there are. And so if I could leave you guys with anything, it would be to try and surround yourself with people who are not like you and listen to their experiences. If you don't know any black people, don't just go to the store and, say, "Hey, you're black. I want to No, you don't do that, because there's so many resources and people have written books and movies that are highlighting their experiences. And I can link to a couple of those in the comments below, or in the description below. But if you want to understand why there's so much racial tension, you have to try and look at the world through other people's lenses.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I would want to leave the viewers with is just, MLK has this quote, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." That's my favorite quote from him. And I don't think silence is just speaking. I think silence also comes with listening as well. So if you're blatantly closing your ears or your eyes to what's going on, that is a form of silence as well. So like you said, continuing to surround yourself with people who are different than you and engaging in conversations that maybe make you uncomfortable or whatever it is, that is very detrimental.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ariana, thanks for joining. And like I said already, Ariana and I actually have another video that's coming out in a couple days that hopefully will be a little bit more fun, less kind of studio format. Should we say what it's about? Kind of a spoiler? Or should we say
let's spoil it.
So Ariana asked several people, what are some questions that, how did you phrase it?
I said, to my white friends, what are questions that you are scared or afraid to ask your black friends?
Exactly. So we're going to answer some of those questions. I think you guys will like that one as well. But Ariana, where can people find you? Instagram, anything you want to plug?
Instagram, Ariana_Madison. I'm very active on there.
All right, there you go. So go follow her on Instagram. And as always, I will see you on another video. Thanks, Ariana.